One of the biggest things I learned is that length of time of an instrument is going to determine a lot for how we perceive that instrument in terms of how loud, how strong it is. If it's too quick, in other words, if there's not enough hold, sustain, decay, linger of that sound, it's just in and out. Because of that, no matter how loud or strong it is, it's just so quick, it never feels big. Snare drums, this comes to mind a lot. When you're trying to add length to the snare drum, don't just look at reverbs, delays, don't look at stuff like that. Look at distortion. Distortion's another way that you can add length to your snare. You know, a backwards gated snare underneath your snare is another cool way to add length to it. There's all sorts of ways, white noise, all sorts of stuff you can come up with to add to your snare underneath it to make it sound cool and add length. These are just a couple, literally turn the devil lock on, create a parallel bus for just the mid-range band that your snare's occupying. In other words, make sure you get rid of the kick, get rid of the high information. Just take that middle section, smush it together, in other words, compress it, and then hit it with some kind of distortion and blend that in. Once you blend that in, you'll have all the length you need. For kick drum, it's a little different. You want length. It's just like a snare drum. You want it to exist a little longer. So you can look to add short decays and things to make it longer, but also harmonic generators do the same thing. Something like R-Bass, Shadow Hills compressor I've mentioned before, but like Spectre plugin. Also the Shep's Omni-Channel 2 I haven't mentioned, but that thing does something very cool with the low end also. You can dial in the filters for where you want, and it adds such a presence boost, a bump there at whatever low end number you set that it's actually going to add like a ringing, like a harmonic generating ringing wherever you want, and it really will help you push the low end and make it appear like it's longer. These psychoacoustic tricks are they're not readily apparent to people who don't do this all the time, but this is going to be a huge building block for you to create the tools you need to get the mixes you want. Because the answer to make the low end stronger and louder is not just to crank the EQ on the low end. That's going to make too much signal, because low end information is big, the waves are wide. It's going to take up all the room in your compressor, all the room in your limiter. It's going to make it where nothing else has a place to go. So instead of that, you got to come up with other ways to do the same thing. Instead of just taming high end, add saturation. Instead of taking the snare and making it as loud as possible and just feeding more of it into a compressor and more of it, add length with distortion. All right? Instead of reverbs, do that stuff I was telling you, blend in other sounds under the snare. And with kick, harmonic generators. You guys got this. Piece of cake. Keep this one short. More stuff to come. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. Take it easy.